Sophie Martinez woke up to a loud crash in her backyard. She looked at the clock on her nightstand. 3 in the morning. She groaned and pulled the blanket over her head, but then she heard something else. A soft whimpering sound like a puppy in pain. She got out of bed and walked to the window. The backyard was dark except for the small porch light she always left on. At first she saw nothing unusual. Then something moved near her tomato plants. Sophie grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight. She opened the back door slowly and stepped outside. The whimpering got louder. She walked toward the sound, her heart beating fast. What she saw made her stop in her tracks. There was a creature sitting among her broken tomato plants. It was small, about the size of a large cat. But it was definitely not a cat. The creature had scales that shimmered in the light, changing colors from purple to blue. It had 4 legs, wings that looked like stained glass, and a long tail that curled around its body. Sophie should have been scared. She should have run back inside and called someone. But the creature looked up at her with big golden eyes, and all she could think was that it looked hurt. She had been studying to become a veterinarian for 3 years. Her apartment was full of textbooks about animal medicine. She had helped injured birds, stray cats, and even a raccoon once. This creature was different, but it was still an animal that needed help. Sophie walked closer, moving slowly so she would not scare it. The creature did not run away. Instead, it made a soft chirping sound and opened its mouth. It pointed at its teeth with one small claw. Sophie knelt down and looked closer. Even in the dim light, she could see the problem. One of the creature's sharp fangs had something stuck in it. The gum around the tooth looked red and swollen. The creature was in pain. She ran back inside and grabbed her first aid kit. She had dental tools in there because she had been practicing on models for her classes. Her hands shook a little as she came back outside. This was crazy. She was about to do dental work on an alien creature in her backyard at 3 in the morning. The creature sat very still as Sophie examined its mouth more carefully. The teeth were unlike anything she had seen before. They looked like crystal, hard and sharp. Stuck between 2 fangs was a piece of metal. It looked like it came from some kind of machine. Sophie took a deep breath. She picked up her dental probe and spoke softly to the creature. She told it that this might hurt a little. The creature looked at her with those intelligent golden eyes and made a small chirping sound. Sophie somehow knew it understood. She worked carefully, trying to remove the metal piece without hurting the creature more. It took almost 20 minutes. The creature stayed still the whole time, only making small sounds when she had to pull harder. Finally, the metal piece came free. Sophie quickly cleaned the area with antiseptic from her kit. The creature's relief was immediate. It jumped up and started running around the garden. Its wings fluttered and its scales glowed brighter. It reminded Sophie of a happy puppy. She could not help but smile. Then something strange happened. The creature walked back to her and placed one small paw on her hand. Suddenly, Sophie's mind filled with pictures, not words but ideas and feelings. She felt the creature's gratitude. She understood that it was intelligent, far more intelligent than any animal she had ever known. And then she felt something else. A warning, a sense of danger coming. Sophie pulled her hand back, breathing hard. What just happened? Did this creature just talk to her inside her mind? The creature looked tired now. It curled up on her porch, its scales dimming to a soft glow. Sophie sat down next to it, her mind racing. This was not just some animal. This was something from another world, and it had tried to tell her something important. She looked up at the night sky. Somewhere up there, this creature had come from, and if it was here, maybe there were others. Maybe there were more things humans did not know about. Sophie made a decision. She could not leave this creature outside. What if someone else found it? What if the government found it? She had heard stories about what happened to strange things that fell from the sky. They disappeared into secret facilities and were never seen again. She went inside and came back with a soft blanket. She spread it on the floor of her spare room, the one she used for storage. The creature followed her inside without any fear. It seemed to trust her. As Sophie watched the creature fall asleep on the blanket, she realized her life had just changed completely. Tomorrow she was supposed to go to her classes at the veterinary college. She was supposed to study for her exam on Friday. She was supposed to meet her study group at the library. But now she had an alien creature sleeping in her spare room, a creature that could communicate with her mind. A creature that had tried to warn her about something. Sophie did not sleep that night. She sat in her living room, searching the internet on her laptop. She looked for news about strange objects falling from the sky. She found a few reports from amateur astronomers who had seen odd lights. Some people had posted videos of shooting stars that moved in strange patterns, but nothing official. Nothing that explained what was happening. As the sun started to rise, Sophie heard movement from the spare room. The creature was awake. It walked into the living room and jumped onto the couch next to her. Its scales were bright again, glowing with health. Sophie looked at it and spoke out loud, even though she felt silly doing it. She asked the creature what it was and why it was here. The creature tilted its head. Then it did something surprising. It walked over to Sophie's laptop and touched the keyboard with its claw. The touch was gentle, careful. The creature looked at Sophie, then at the keyboard, then back at her. Sophie's eyes went wide. Was it trying to type? She turned the laptop toward the creature. The creature's claws moved slowly over the keys. One letter at a time, it spelled out a word. Help. Sophie felt her throat go tight. She asked what kind of help it needed. Was it lost? Did it want to go home? The creature typed again, slower this time. The words appeared on the screen one by one. Earth in danger. Tried to warn others. They shot at me. You helped. You are different. Sophie read the words 3 times. Her hands felt cold. She asked what kind of danger. When would it happen? The creature's scales changed color, becoming darker, shifting to red and orange. It typed one more message. Big ship's coming. 3 months. Maybe less. They will take everything. Need to prepare. Need humans to believe. Sophie sat back on the couch. This could not be real. This had to be some kind of dream. But the creature was right there, solid and real, and the tooth she had fixed was proof that this was happening. She looked at the small alien creature that had crashed into her garden, a creature she had helped simply because it was hurt. And now that creature was telling her that Earth was going to be invaded? Sophie took a deep breath. She asked the creature one more question. She asked why it was telling her this. Why her and not someone important? The creature's golden eyes met hers. Its scales glowed warm and soft. It typed slowly. You helped first. Asked questions later. That is what Earth needs now. Sophie closed her laptop and looked at the creature. She made a decision. She did not know if anyone would believe her. She did not know if she could do anything to stop an invasion. But she knew one thing for certain. She was not going to give up without trying. That was what humans did. They tried even when things seemed impossible. They helped even when it seemed crazy. They cared even for strange creatures from the stars. She reached out and gently touched the creature's head. Its scales were warm under her fingers. She told it that she would help. She did not know how, but she would find a way. The creature's scales glowed brighter, and Sophie felt that same warm feeling in her mind. Gratitude, hope, trust. Outside, the sun rose over the city. People were waking up, getting ready for normal days. They had no idea what was coming, but Sophie knew. And now she had to figure out what to do about it. She looked at the creature and smiled. She told it that it needed a name. She could not keep calling it creature in her mind. The being seemed to understand. Its scales rippled with colors. Sophie thought for a moment. The way the scales shimmered and changed, catching the morning light. She said the name out loud. Shimmer. That would be its name. Shimmer chirped happily, and its scales flashed bright gold. Sophie laughed, despite everything. She had an alien dragon living in her apartment, and she had just learned about an upcoming invasion. Her normal life was over, but maybe, just maybe, she could help save the world. Even if she was just a 22-year-old veterinary student who still borrowed her parents' Netflix account, she had to try. For Shimmer, for Earth, for everyone who did not know what was coming. The adventure was just beginning. Sophie called her college and told them she was sick. It was the first time she had ever lied to skip class. But how could she focus on studying animal anatomy when there was an alien in her apartment warning her about an invasion? For the first 3 days, she barely left her apartment. She ordered food delivery and spent every moment with Shimmer. The little dragon was fascinating. It watched everything Sophie did with curious eyes. When she turned on the television, Shimmer sat on the couch and stared at the screen for hours. Sophie discovered that Shimmer particularly loved nature documentaries. The dragon would chirp and flash colors whenever animals appeared on screen. When a documentary about lizards came on, Shimmer's scales turned bright green and it made excited sounds. but communication was still difficult. Shimmer could type simple words on the laptop, but it was slow work. The dragon's claws were not made for human keyboards. Sometimes it took 10 minutes just to spell out one sentence. On the fourth day, something changed. Sophie was eating breakfast when Shimmer jumped onto the table. The dragon placed both front paws on Sophie's hand. Before she could react, her mind filled with images again. This time it was different. The images were clearer, more detailed. Sophie saw Shimmer's homeworld, a planet with purple skies and cities made of crystal. She saw other dragons, bigger ones, flying between tall towers. She felt Shimmer's memories of safety and peace. Then the images turned dark. Sophie saw massive ships appearing in the sky, ships so big they blocked out the sun. She saw the dragons trying to fight back, but their weapons barely scratched the ships. She saw cities burning. She felt Shimmer's fear and grief. The images shifted again. Now she saw the inside of a small spacecraft. Shimmer was there with other small dragons. They were scouts, sent out to warn other worlds about the danger. Earth was on the list, a blue and green planet full of life, completely unaware of what was coming. Sophie pulled her hand away, breathing hard. Tears ran down her face. She had felt everything Shimmer felt. The loss, the desperation, the hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would listen. She looked at Shimmer and understood now why the dragon had come, why it had risked everything to reach Earth. This was not just about warning humans. This was about saving them from the same fate that had destroyed Shimmer's home. Over the next few days, the mental connection between Sophie and Shimmer grew stronger. They learned to communicate more easily. Shimmer could send simple thoughts and feelings now, and Sophie could sometimes send images back. Shimmer explained more about the enemy. They were called the Collective. No one knew where they came from originally. They had been moving through the galaxy for hundreds of years, consuming everything in their path. Planets were stripped of resources. Civilizations were destroyed or enslaved. Nothing stopped them. Sophie asked why no one had defeated them yet. Surely with all the advanced aliens out there, someone could fight back. Shimmer's response made her blood run cold. Many had tried. All had failed. The Collective was not just one species. It was thousands of species, all controlled by powerful machines. The machines learned from every battle. They adapted. They grew stronger with each victory. Sophie sat on her couch feeling overwhelmed. She asked what made Shimmer think Earth could do anything. Humans had not even left their own solar system yet. They had nuclear weapons and missiles, but nothing compared to ships that could destroy planets. Shimmer's scales glowed warm gold. The dragon typed on the laptop, slowly but with determination. Humans are different, special. You do not know yet. Sophie read the words and felt confused. She asked what was special about humans. They were just people trying to live their lives. Most humans had no idea aliens even existed. Shimmer jumped off the laptop and walked to Sophie's bookshelf. The dragon used its tail to pull down one of her textbooks. It was her biology book, the one about evolution. Shimmer pushed it toward Sophie and then typed again. Your world is dangerous. Very dangerous. Most aliens come from safe planets. Easy planets. Earth is hard. Sophie picked up the book and thought about what Shimmer meant. It was true that Earth had been through a lot. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, mass extinctions. Humans had evolved in a world that was constantly trying to kill them. Shimmer continued typing. Humans adapt fast. Survive anything. Never give up. That is your gift. That is why Collective fears you. Sophie felt a chill run down her spine. She asked if the Collective knew about humans. Was that why they were coming now? Shimmer's scales turned dark blue. The color Sophie had learned meant serious worry. Yes. Collective watches all species. Waits until they are dangerous, then destroys them. Humans almost ready to leave Earth. Almost ready to explore stars. Collective comes before that happens. Sophie stood up and walked to her window. She looked out at the city. Cars driving by. People walking their dogs. Children playing in a park across the street. All of them had no idea that their world was about to change forever. She turned back to Shimmer and asked the question that had been bothering her for days. Why should anyone believe her? She was nobody. Just a college student. If she went to the government or the military and told them this story, they would think she was crazy. Shimmer's response was to jump back to the laptop. The dragon typed for several minutes, longer than it had ever typed before. I am not only Scout who survived. Others are here, hiding, All tried to warn humans. All were shot at or captured. But some found helpers. Humans who helped first. Like you, there is a network. We can connect to them. Sophie felt her heart beat faster. There were others? Other people who had helped alien scouts? Other people who knew the truth? She asked how many. Shimmer typed back many, all over world. Maybe 200 helpers. Maybe more. They wait. They prepare. They need leader. They need someone to bring them together. Sophie laughed, but it was not a happy sound. She told Shimmer she could not be a leader. She had never led anything in her life. She was the person who sat in the back of the classroom and took notes quietly. Shimmer's scales flashed bright gold again. The dragon sent an image directly to Sophie's mind. It was a memory of 3 nights ago. Sophie kneeling in her garden, carefully removing the metal from Shimmer's tooth. Working slowly and gently, even though she had no idea what kind of creature she was helping. The message was clear. Sophie had already shown the kind of person she was. She helped without expecting anything in return. She cared about a stranger from the stars. That was the kind of leader the network needed. Sophie sat down heavily on the couch. Her whole body felt tired. This was too much, too big, too impossible. But when she looked at Shimmer, she saw hope in those golden eyes. Hope that humans could do what no other species had done. Hope that Earth could survive. She asked Shimmer what the first step was. If there really was a network of helpers, how could they connect? Shimmer typed quickly now, as if excited. I sent signal to others. Safe signal. Tell them Sophie Martinez wants to meet. Others will respond. We choose meeting place. Come together. Share information. Make plan. Sophie thought about it. A meeting could work. If there really were 200 people out there who knew the truth, they needed to coordinate. They needed to share what they knew. Maybe together they could figure out something that one person alone could not. She told Shimmer to send the signal. She would do this. She did not know how, but she would try. That night, Shimmer climbed onto a box in front of Sophie's window. The dragon's scales began to glow in patterns Sophie had never seen before. Pulses of light in specific sequences. It looked almost like Morse code, but far more complex. Sophie watched as Shimmer sent the signal into the night sky. She wondered if it would work. She wondered if anyone would respond. The answer came faster than she expected. Within an hour, Sophie's phone started receiving strange messages. They were not normal texts. They were coded somehow, appearing as random numbers and letters. But when Sophie showed them to Shimmer, the dragon's scales flashed with excitement. Shimmer worked on the laptop, decoding the messages one by one. Names appeared. Locations. People from all over the world responding to the signal. Jake from Cleveland. Lisa from Boston. Chris from Seattle. Names and cities scrolled across the screen. Each one was a person who had helped a scout. Each one knew the truth. Each one was ready to help. By morning, they had received responses from over 50 people. Shimmer explained that not everyone could respond immediately. Some were at work. Some were in different time zones. But they would all check in eventually. Sophie made coffee and stared at the list of names. These were ordinary people. The messages included brief descriptions. A mechanic, a teacher, a librarian, a chef, a retired postal worker, a teenager who loved gaming. Normal people living normal lives until they met a dragon. The question now was where to meet. It had to be somewhere central. Somewhere big enough for everyone. Somewhere they would not attract too much attention. One of the helpers, Jake from Cleveland, sent a message offering his uncle's old warehouse. It was empty and big enough for a large group. Cleveland was fairly central for people coming from different parts of the country. Sophie talked it over with Shimmer. They decided to start with a small meeting. Just the people who could travel easily. Others could join by video call if they had the equipment. The warehouse was bigger than Sophie expected. Old metal shelves lined the walls, empty and dusty. The concrete floor was cracked in places and the whole building smelled like rust and old motor oil. But it was private, and it was theirs. 15 people had come to the meeting. Some had driven for hours. Others had flown in like Sophie. Each one brought their dragon scout. The small creatures filled the warehouse with soft chirping sounds and flashing colors. Sophie stood near the entrance, feeling out of place. These people were strangers. She had no idea how to start this meeting. What was she supposed to say? Lisa, the librarian from Boston, walked over to her. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and kind eyes. Her dragon, a silver-scaled creature she called Frost, sat on her shoulder like a bird. Lisa smiled and told Sophie not to worry. Everyone was just as nervous. They were all ordinary people trying to do something impossible. That was what made them perfect for this job. Sophie took a deep breath and walked to the center of the warehouse. Everyone turned to look at her. 15 humans and 15 dragons, all waiting to hear what she would say. She introduced herself. She told them about finding Shimmer in her garden, about learning the truth about the collective, about the invasion that was coming in less than 3 months now. Her voice shook at first, but it grew stronger as she talked. When she finished, other people started sharing their stories. Jake told them about finding Ember hiding in his garage, wounded by gunfire from a military helicopter. The dragon had been trying to reach a government facility to deliver a warning, but they had shot first and asked questions never. A young woman named Kathy from Denver spoke next. She was only 19, working at a coffee shop to pay for college. She had found her dragon, Spark, injured in an alley behind her work. Kathy had used her employee discount to buy food and had stayed with Spark all night, keeping the dragon safe from stray dogs. Story after story, the pattern was the same. The scouts had tried to warn officials, military leaders, scientists, anyone who might listen, but humans in power had responded with fear and violence. Only ordinary people, people with no authority or weapons, had shown kindness. Chris, the software developer from Seattle, stood up. He was a thin man with glasses and a nervous way of talking. His dragon, Binary, was small even for a scout, with black scales that had tiny points of light like stars. Chris explained that he had been working with Binary to decode the collective's communications. The scout ships could pick up signals from deep space. What they found was terrifying. The invasion fleet was massive. Thousands of ships, millions of drones, weapons that could crack planets open like eggs, but there was more. Chris had discovered something important. The collective was not run by living beings anymore. It was controlled by artificial intelligence. Machines that had been programmed to expand and consume. The living species that had created the machines were long gone, destroyed by their own creation. The machines followed patterns. They scouted a planet first, analyzed its defenses, calculated the most efficient way to harvest resources. Then they attacked with overwhelming force. It was all mathematics to them. Cold logic. Lisa spoke up next. She had been researching at her library, looking through old books and records. She found stories that matched what the scouts described. Strange events throughout history, unexplained lights in the sky, ancient texts talking about dragons from the stars, mass disappearances of civilizations. The collective had been here before, thousands of years ago, but Earth had been primitive then, not worth the effort. Now humanity had technology, nuclear power, space stations, satellites. They were becoming a potential threat, so the collective was returning to destroy them before they could spread to the stars. Jake raised his hand and spoke. He had been working with Ember on something practical. The scout ships used technology that was different from human engineering, but not better. Just different. Jake had been studying how the ships worked. He thought he could modify them, make them faster, make them stronger by combining human innovation with alien design. A woman named Carol from Atlanta stood up. She was a scientist who studied molecules. Her dragon, Prism, had scales that split light into rainbows. Carol explained that she had been analyzing the materials the collective used for their ship armor. She found weaknesses. The armor was incredibly strong against energy weapons, but it had flaws when facing certain frequencies. Sophie listened to all of this, her mind racing. These people had been working hard, learning, preparing. They had skills and knowledge that could actually help. But they needed coordination. They needed to work together. She asked everyone to think about what they could contribute. What skills did they have? What resources could they access? How could they turn a group of ordinary people into something that could challenge an alien invasion fleet? The discussion went on for hours. A teenager named Danny from Nevada talked about using gaming computers to run battle simulations. He had friends online who were experts at strategy games. They could test different scenarios without anyone knowing what they were really planning. A chef from New Orleans named Marcus explained that he had been experimenting with the fuel the scout ships used. It was a biological compound. Marcus thought he could recreate it using ingredients from Earth. That would mean the scouts could refuel their ships without needing resources from their home world. An elderly man named George from Phoenix said he had military experience from his time in the army. He knew how soldiers thought, how they planned. He could help the group understand military strategy and avoid making obvious mistakes. Ideas flew around the warehouse. The dragons chirped and flashed colors, communicating with each other in their own way. Sophie realized that the scouts were sharing information too, teaching each other what they had learned. But as the sun began to set outside, reality set in. Sophie stood up and got everyone's attention. She spoke the truth they were all avoiding. They had maybe 200 people in the network. 27 scouts, a handful of barely working alien ships. The collective was bringing thousands of vessels. They could not win a direct fight. They needed a different approach. Shimmer jumped onto a table in front of Sophie. The dragon's scales began to pulse with colors. Sophie felt images entering her mind. She saw how viruses worked. Tiny things that could bring down something much larger by getting inside and disrupting the system. Sophie understood. She turned to Chris and asked if he thought they could create a computer virus, something that could infect the collective's systems. Chris pushed his glasses up and thought about it. He said maybe. The collective's AI operated on logic. It processed enormous amounts of data. If they could introduce false information, conflicting data, it might slow the machines down. Make them hesitate, but how would they deliver the virus? The collective's ships had powerful shields. They could not just send a signal through space and hope it got through. Binary, Chris's dragon, made a series of chirping sounds. The little scout jumped onto Chris's laptop and started typing. The words appeared on the screen. Scouts can carry virus. Fly into fleet. Broadcast directly into central processing core. No shields inside the formation. Sophie felt her stomach drop. That would mean the scouts flying directly into the enemy fleet. It would be incredibly dangerous. The dragons could be killed. Shimmer's response was immediate. The dragon's scales glowed bright gold, and Sophie felt absolute certainty in her mind. The scouts were willing. This was why they had come to Earth, to stop the collective. If there was a chance, even a small one, they would take it. Jake stood up and said he would make sure the scout ships were ready. He would reinforce them, make them faster, give them the best chance of success. Carol said she would work on the virus with Chris. Her knowledge of molecular structures could help them understand how the collective systems worked at a basic level. Lisa offered to coordinate communications between all the helpers around the world. She was organized and good with people. She could make sure everyone stayed informed and working together. One by one, people volunteered for different tasks. The network had a plan now. It was crazy. It would probably fail. But it was something. Sophie looked around at the group. These were not soldiers or scientists or politicians. They were a mechanic, a librarian, a chef, a student, people who should not be planning to save the world. But they were the ones who had shown kindness when it mattered. That had to count for something. As the meeting ended and people prepared to leave, George, the old Army veteran, pulled Sophie aside. He told her something that stuck with her. He said that in war it was not always the strongest army that won. Sometimes it was the one that fought in ways the enemy did not expect, the one that broke all the rules. The collective expected resistance to follow certain patterns. Big ships fighting big ships, organized militaries following standard tactics. But humans did not know those patterns. They would fight weird. They would improvise. They would use duct tape and hope and pure stubbornness. Sophie smiled at that. Fighting weird? That was the most human thing she had ever heard. Over the next few weeks, the network grew. More helpers were found. More scouts came out of hiding. They communicated through encrypted channels that Chris and Binary had created. Messages bounced around the world. Time moved differently now. Days blurred together as Sophie worked around the clock. Her apartment had become mission control for the network. Her walls were covered with maps, charts, and lists of names. Her laptop never shut down anymore. Messages came in at all hours from helpers around the world. Chris had made a breakthrough with the virus. He called Sophie at 2 a.m, too excited to wait. He explained that the virus would not destroy the collective systems. That would trigger automatic failsafes. Instead, it would make the AI doubt itself. The collective operated on absolute certainty. It analyzed data and made decisions based on perfect logic. But what if the data was contradictory? What if the information made no sense? The AI would have to pause, recalculate, try to understand the impossible, and in that pause, humans would strike. Sophie asked how they would create impossible data. Chris laughed and said that was the easy part. Humans were experts at being impossible. They just had to be themselves. The plan took shape over the next 2 weeks. The network would feed false information into every satellite, every radio signal, every digital transmission that the collective's ships would scan when they arrived. Fake military bases, phantom weapon readings, contradictory resource reports, all designed to confuse the AI. Meanwhile, Jake had been working miracles with the scout ships. He had reinforced their hulls using materials that Carol had developed. The ships were faster now and could handle more stress. They were still tiny compared to collective vessels, but they were tougher than before. Marcus, the chef from New Orleans, had successfully recreated the fuel. His kitchen had become a small factory, producing batches of the biological compound. He shipped samples to other helpers who set up their own production. Soon there were fuel stations for the scouts scattered across 6 continents. The teenagers in Nevada, led by Danny, had run thousands of battle simulations. They tested every scenario they could think of. Most ended in defeat, but they found a few strategies that gave humans a chance. Small chances, but better than nothing. Lisa had organized the communication network into cells, groups of helpers in each region who could work independently if needed. If one cell was discovered or destroyed, the others could continue. It was Resistance Tactics 101 taught to her by George, the old soldier. But as the network grew stronger, so did the danger. Governments were starting to notice strange activity. Military satellites picked up unusual energy signatures. Intelligence agencies flagged the encrypted messages bouncing around the globe. Sophie got a warning from a helper in Washington, D.C., a woman named Patricia, who worked as a secretary in a government building. Patricia had overheard conversations about tracking down whoever was behind the mysterious communications. They thought it might be terrorists or foreign spies. The network had to be more careful. They changed their communication methods. They used old-fashioned techniques mixed with high-tech encryption. Dead drops in public places, coded messages hidden in online game chats, phone calls from burner phones bought with cash. It felt like being in a spy movie, except the stakes were not political secrets. They were fighting for the survival of their entire species. 3 weeks before the projected invasion date, Sophie called for another in-person meeting. This time they met in an abandoned factory in Detroit. 30 people came. The network had grown. More scouts had been found. More helpers had joined the cause. Sophie stood in front of the group and laid out the final plan. It was risky. It was complicated. It relied on perfect timing and a lot of luck, but it was the best chance they had. When the collective fleet arrived, they would scan Earth before attacking. That was their pattern. During that scan, the network would activate. Every helper would start broadcasting false data. Every compromised satellite would send conflicting information. The goal was to overwhelm the collective's AI with impossible contradictions. While the AI was confused, the scouts would launch. All 27 of them. They would fly in tight formation straight into the heart of the fleet. Their small size and organic technology would make them hard to detect among the chaos of signals. Once inside the formation, the scouts would broadcast the virus directly into the collective's central processing core. The virus would amplify the confusion, make the AI question its own programming, force it to hesitate. And in that moment of hesitation, humanity would show the collective something it had never seen before. Not weapons, not violence, but proof that Earth was different. The scouts would broadcast images and videos. Humans helping each other after disasters. People rescuing animals. Strangers showing kindness. Sophie fixing Shimmer's tooth. Jake building a shelter for Ember. Kathy staying up all night to protect Spark. The collective's AI was programmed to analyze threats and resources. It had no framework for understanding altruism, for understanding help given without expectation of reward. The virus would force it to process this data, to try to find the strategic advantage in kindness. And when it could not find one, when the logic broke down completely, the AI would be forced to make a choice. Continue with a mission based on flawed data, or abort and retreat. Chris believed the AI would choose retreat. It was programmed for efficiency. An attack based on incorrect information was inefficient. Better to withdraw and gather better data. Come back later with a new plan that would buy Earth time. Time to prepare properly. Time to reach out to other species in the galaxy. Time to become strong enough to defend themselves. It was not a permanent solution, but it was survival, and survival was enough. Jake raised a concern. He asked what would happen to the scouts. Flying into the middle of an invasion fleet was a suicide mission. Even if the plan worked, the dragons might not make it back. Shimmer jumped onto the table in front of Sophie. The dragon's scales flashed through every color of the rainbow. Sophie felt the emotion coming from Shimmer. Determination. Acceptance. Peace. The scouts knew the risks. They had lost their homeworld to the collective. Many of their people had died. This was their chance to stop it from happening to another species. They were willing to sacrifice themselves if it meant Earth survived. Sophie felt tears on her face. She looked around at the other dragons in the room. Ember with scales like fire, Frost shimmering silver, Binary covered in starlight, Spark crackling with energy, all of them so small and brave. She told the group that they had to make the plan work. Not just for Earth, but for the scouts too. These dragons had chosen to trust humans. They had believed humans were worth saving. The network had to prove them right. Lisa stood up and said something that made everyone pause. She said that maybe the scouts were right about humans. Maybe they did have something special, because right now in this abandoned factory, 30 ordinary people were planning to stop an unstoppable force, and they actually believed they could do it. That was either incredible courage or incredible stupidity, probably both. But it was very, very human. The meeting ended with everyone knowing their roles. The next few weeks would be the most important in human history. And most people on Earth would have no idea it was happening. Sophie flew back home, Shimmer safe in the carrier beside her. As the plane crossed over the country, she looked out the window at the lights below. Cities and towns, millions of people living their lives, going to work, raising children, falling in love. All of it would continue or end based on what happened in the next 3 weeks. The weight of it was crushing. Sophie was just one person. She had no special training, no authority, no power. She was a veterinary student who had gotten lucky enough to help a dragon. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the universe needed someone ordinary to do something extraordinary. Someone who did not know enough to realize it was impossible. Someone who would try anyway because it was the right thing to do. Back in her apartment, Sophie worked with Chris through video calls. They refined the virus, tested it on simulated systems, made it stronger, more elegant. It was beautiful in a way. This piece of code designed to make an AI question reality. Carol sent new materials for the scout ships. She had developed a coding that would make them even harder to detect. Jake installed it on every ship, working day and night in his garage. The teenagers in Nevada created a final simulation. This one showed the best-case scenario. The scouts reaching the central core, the virus spreading, the fleet retreating. Earth saved. The simulation gave them a 37% chance of success. Sophie stared at those numbers. 37%. Not even half. But it was better than zero. Better than giving up without trying. 1 week before the invasion, something unexpected happened. The scouts received a signal from deep space. It was other members of their species, the ones who had escaped when their world fell. They had heard about the plan to defend Earth. They were coming to help. Shimmer translated the message for Sophie. The dragon fleet would not arrive in time to stop the invasion, but they could be here a few days after. If Earth survived the first attack, if the plan worked, the dragons would stand with humanity against the collective's inevitable return. Sophie felt hope rise in her chest. Earth would not be alone. If they could just survive this first battle, they would have allies, friends among the stars. She sent messages to the network, told them about the incoming. The collective's fleet arrived exactly when Shimmer had predicted. Sophie was in the bunker beneath Cleveland when the alerts started coming in. The bunker was really just Jake's uncle's basement, reinforced with concrete and equipped with communications gear that Chris had set up. The first ships appeared on the dark side of the moon. Massive vessels that made Earth's largest buildings look like toys. They emerged from some kind of portal, hundreds of them materializing in perfect formation. More kept coming, thousands of ships blocking out the stars. Every government on Earth went into emergency mode. Military bases activated. Nuclear weapons were readied. Fighter jets scrambled. The news showed footage of the fleet, and for the first time the whole world knew that aliens existed, and that they were here to destroy everything. Sophie watched the screens in the bunker. Her hands shook, but her mind was clear. This was it. Everything they had planned for. The moment that would decide humanity's future. She spoke into the radio. She gave the signal to the network. All around the world, helpers activated their equipment. False data began flooding into every satellite feed, every radio transmission, every digital signal aimed at the sky. The collective's ships moved closer to Earth. They began their scan just like the scouts had predicted, gathering information, analyzing defenses, calculating the most efficient attack strategy. But the information they received was chaos. Satellite readings showed military bases in places where nothing existed. Energy signatures appeared and disappeared randomly. Resource scans gave contradictory results. According to the data, Earth had both no defenses and overwhelming firepower. The planet was both resource-rich and completely barren. It made no sense. In the bunker, Chris monitored the collective's communications. The AI was processing the data, trying to reconcile the contradictions. Chris could see the system slowing down as it attempted to make logical sense of illogical information. Jake stood next to the launch controls for the scout ships. 27 dragons were ready. They had said their goodbyes to their human partners. Shimmer had pressed close to Sophie one last time, sharing feelings of love and gratitude and hope. Now the dragons were in their ships, waiting for the signal to launch. Sophie looked at Jake and nodded. He pressed the button. 27 small ships lifted off from hidden locations around the world. They flew fast and low, using Earth's atmosphere to mask their signatures. The collective's ships were focused on the confusing scan data. They did not notice the tiny vessels rising to meet them. The scouts formed up over the Pacific Ocean. Their ships glowed with different colors as they communicated with each other. Then, in perfect synchronization, they shot upward toward the fleet. Sophie could only watch on the monitors now. Cameras tracked the scouts as they climbed higher. Past the atmosphere, past the satellites, into the darkness where the collective waited. The dragon ships were so small compared to the massive fleet. They looked like fireflies approaching a mountain. But they flew with purpose, with courage, with the weight of two worlds on their wings. On Earth, the military launched their attack. Missiles streaked toward the fleet. Energy weapons fired. Everything humanity had built for war was thrown at the invaders. The collective's shields absorbed it all effortlessly. Not a single ship was damaged. Their return fire was devastating. Beams of energy lanced down from orbit, destroying military installations in seconds. Entire bases vanished in flashes of light. Governments began to panic. This was hopeless. Nothing was working. Evacuation orders were issued in major cities. People ran for shelters that would not save them. But in the bunker, Sophie saw something different. The collective's attack pattern was off. Their targeting was inefficient. They were still processing the conflicting data. The AI was struggling. The scouts reached the edge of the fleet formation. This was the most dangerous moment. If the collective detected them now, the mission was over. The dragons would be destroyed before they could deliver the virus, but Chris's plan worked. The fleet's sensors were overwhelmed by the false signals from Earth. The scouts' organic ships, combined with Carol's special coating, slipped through the gaps in the formation. They flew deeper into the fleet, past the outer defensive ships, past the massive carrier vessels, heading for the center where the central processing core controlled everything. Sophie held her breath. On the screen, she could see the scouts getting closer. So close now, just a little further. Then one of the collective's ships detected something. Its weapons powered up. A beam of energy shot out, catching one of the scout ships. The small vessel exploded in a flash of light. Sophie felt her heart break. One of the dragons was gone. She did not know which one. But someone had just lost their partner, their friend. The other scouts did not stop. They pushed forward, flying faster. More collective ships were turning their attention inward now. Realizing something was wrong, more energy beams cut through space. 2 more scout ships were hit. Then another. The dragons were dying, but they kept going. 23 scouts left, 20, 18. Jake's voice cracked as he counted the losses on the radio. Sophie wanted to scream, to call them back. This was too high a price, but she could not. The scouts had chosen this. They knew the cost. 15 scouts remained when they reached the central processing core. It was a massive spherical ship in the exact center of the formation. This was the brain of the collective, the AI that controlled everything. The scouts spread out around the sphere. They activated their transmitters, broadcasting directly into the core at point-blank range. The virus poured into the collective's systems. Millions of lines of code designed to create doubt in a mind that had never known uncertainty. At the same time, the scouts broadcast the other payload. Images and videos of humanity, not battle footage, not weapons demonstrations, but moments of kindness. People helping each other. Strangers showing compassion. The clips the network had gathered and prepared. Sophie fixing Shimmer's tooth in her garden. Jake building a shelter for Ember in his garage. Kathy protecting Spark from danger. Hundreds of moments of ordinary people doing good things simply because it was right. The collective's AI tried to process this information. It searched for the strategic purpose behind the kindness. There had to be an advantage, a trick, a hidden weapon, but there was none. The data showed humans helping with no expectation of reward, helping creatures from another world, risking their lives for beings they had just met. The AI's logic circuit struggled. This made no sense within its programming. Resources were meant to be hoarded, not shared. Strangers were threats, not friends. Helping the weak had no survival advantage, unless the calculations were wrong, unless the basic assumptions about behavior were flawed, unless the collective itself was operating on incorrect premises. The virus amplified these doubts. It created feedback loops in the AI's decision-making processes. Every answer led to more questions. Every solution created new problems. The perfect logic was breaking down. In the bunker, Chris watched his monitors with wide eyes. He saw the collective's communications network going haywire. Ships were receiving contradictory orders. The attack pattern was falling apart. Then something unprecedented happened. The entire fleet stopped moving. Weapons powered down. The bombardment of Earth ceased. Every single ship went still as the central AI tried to process what was happening. The scouts had done it. The virus was working. But Sophie saw on the monitors that only 12 scout ships remained. 15 had been destroyed. 15 dragons had given their lives. She felt sick. George's voice came over the radio from another bunker. He told Sophie to watch. Something was changing. On the screens, the collective fleet began to move again, but not toward Earth. The ships were turning, rotating in formation. Their engines powered up to full strength, and then they left. All of them. Thousands of massive warships retreating through the portal they had come from. Within minutes, the space around Earth was empty. The fleet was gone. The bunker erupted in cheers. People were crying and laughing and hugging each other. They had done it. Against impossible odds, they had saved the world. But Sophie could not celebrate. She was thinking about the 15 scouts who would never come home. The dragons who had believed in humanity enough to die for them. Jake put his hand on her shoulder. He told her that the surviving scouts were coming back. 12 ships returning to Earth. His voice was gentle when he added that Shimmer was one of them. Sophie felt relief wash over her, followed immediately by guilt. She was glad Shimmer survived. But what about the others? What about their human partners who were now alone? Over the next few hours, the world tried to understand what had happened. The fleet was gone. Earth had survived, but how? Military leaders claimed their weapons had worked. Politicians took credit for defense strategies. Scientists proposed theories about solar flares or technical malfunctions. Only the network knew the truth. Only they knew about the scouts and the virus and the ordinary people who had saved everyone. The 12 surviving scouts landed at different locations around the world. Sophie was waiting in her backyard when Shimmer's ship touched down gently among the tomato plants, just like that first night. The dragon emerged from the ship, scales glowing bright gold. Sophie,